Welcome everyone. Welcome to the second day of our Arizona State Data Center virtual annual meeting. My name is Alan Barnes. I am the Arizona State Data Center Coordinator. Um, we work out of the Arizona Commerce Authority under the state branch, which is the Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity, and I work within the state data center is within the Arizona State Demographer's Office under the leadership of Dr. Jim Chang. Um, this is going to be our last day for this meeting, our second day, and I just wanted to thank all of you for joining us today and welcome you all. We will have three presentations today. First will be our Data.Census.Gov update, which will be presented by Jessica Barnett. Later, we will have our LEHD, Local Employment and Housing Dynamics Programs, um, by Ms. Earlene Dowell. And then lastly, we will have a look at more of the census data tools from our data dissemination specialist, Lacey Lofton. Um, we'll probably, if you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat, and then at the end of the different presentations, you can raise your hand too if you'd like to ask your question in person. And so we're going to go ahead. It's 5 after. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first presentation. Again, this is the Data.Census.Gov update from Ms. Jessica Barnett. She's a survey statistician with the Dissemination Outreach Branch of the U.S. Census Bureau. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. Let me go ahead and get myself situated. Can somebody confirm? Oh, I gotta share. Can you confirm that you can see the screen?
Yes, I can see the
Awesome.
screen.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so I'm glad to be here today. Clearly, I'm not Connie. I know that Connie has been updating you all about the changes, the progress of Data.Census.Gov, probably at least for the last couple of years now. But she caught a very nasty cold, so she's not feeling very well. So she asked me to go ahead and fill in for her. So I am doing that today. So without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. So I wanted to first give you some of the updates that we have, some of our latest updates about the site. One of the things that you may have noticed more recently is that we've been focusing on some of the navigational issues that we've been having. Between the survey that we did recently, the comments that we've received from you and from all sorts of different data users, we've come to recognize that we still have a little bit of a navigational problem with the site. Some people are having some trouble, primarily newer users to the site are having some trouble in learning how to use it, figuring out kind of what they need to do. So we've been continuing to work on that. One of the things that we've been throwing around, one of the solutions, is to possibly add more help buttons throughout the site. We have a couple help buttons scattered throughout, but try and make more of those available so that every step of the way, data users can have some guidance on what they need to do or what their next steps are with using the site. So that's one of the things that we're focusing on right now. The other thing you've probably definitely seen is that the site looks very different than it did, a couple months ago. There was a refresh done to Census.Gov, and so the site has been updated. Data.Census.Gov has been updated to kind of mimic that Census.Gov look. So it's dramatically, I think, dramatically different from what it looks like. Functionality hasn't changed, nothing like that, but it definitely looks different. So just, I'm sure you all have noticed that if you've gone to the site at all. We also have a lot of work that we've done on the mapping. We have a lot of enhancements that we've done to that. Some of that I'm actually going to go over in some of the examples that we go into later on, so you'll kind of see what we've done with that. And then also wanted to mention that we are preparing for the island area update, or the island area data release that's coming up. It's October 20th, so that's actually next Thursday. The island areas data is going to be coming out for the 2020 decennial census of island areas. So we're preparing for that. So that's something to look forward to. And actually, before I get going in the site, I'm going to go ahead and just, the weather's not too hot outside right now. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my camera just so there's no issues with the bandwidth. If anything comes up, if you can't hear me, or if there's any kind of technical issues, please feel free to interrupt and let me know. So we have some examples that we're going to go over today. We're going to kind of touch on how to use the single search bar, but also the advanced search. And I want to get into some of the functionality that you may be aware of, but it's become a little more useful now. We've done some updates, to the mapping. I mentioned those, so I want to definitely touch on all of that. So let's go ahead and get going. So for our first example, we want to look at the 2021 ACS data that was actually released this past September. So this is the 1-year data that came out. For this, we want to use a data profile tables, and we're actually looking at Buckeye, Arizona, and we're going to take a look at the geographic profile. That is another aspect of the site that's seen quite a little update. Let me go open up the site, right? And so we're on Data.Census.Gov. You can see that it does look very different. If you can recall what it used to look like, it's colors, everything's just very, very different with it. And so for this example, we're going to use the single search bar. So we're just going to type in, we're looking for the data profile table. So you can use the single search bar to kind of, if you have something in mind, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of quickly get to what you want. So I want ACS data profile table. So I'm going to use the acronym for it, which is DP. And then we want it for Buckeye. I'm just going to type that in there. All right, so we have ACS DP Buckeye, Arizona. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have. All right, and so when we get this back, we can see that we have 2 filters that were added, one for Buckeye and then one for the ACS. And we also have the 4 data profile tables available to us. Few things on the screen that I just wanted to mention. I mentioned help buttons. So here's an example of one that we have. This little question mark icon here. If you click on that, it gives you some information about these filter chips, which are what we refer to these as. You can see that there's 6 different types of filter chips, and some of them have locks and some of them have X's. Now you can see that the 2 that we have locks. The reason for that is because they were picked up, if you will, by using the single search bar. The ones that we don't have, they're the ones that have X's. Those are ones that you've manually added to your search. And so if we were to add filters and using these filters, this menu over here on the far left, that's when we would be able to get those ones with the X's. The difference between them, the primary difference, is that ones that have the lock icon can't easily be removed from the site. You would have to start a brand new search in order to get rid of them. There are definitely advantages to sometimes having that lock in there, but sometimes it's also nice to be able to kind of manually remove them. So it just depends on what it is you're trying to do. If you do have those you've manually added and they have the X, you can just click on the X and they're gone. So you're good to go with that. Let me go ahead and close out of that. You can see that we have all 4 tables here. If you did have a longer list of tables, you can change the number that you look at. Right now, the site defaults to showing you 10 tables at a time, but you could look at 25 or 50 of them at once if you wanted. And I mentioned over here in this menu, if you wanted to add additional filters to your search, right now we have Buckeye. Let's say, for example, we wanted to add some other spots in Arizona, or any other type of geography, we could do so using this menu over here. Then over here on the far right, we have our geographic profile. If you're not familiar with the geographic profiles, they provide a very wide range of information about this particular geography, in this case, Buckeye. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the profile. And again, if you're familiar with how they used to look, you can see that they're quite different looking now. Same information, none of that's really changed. It's just the look of it's changed. So we're going to give it a few moments to go ahead and load, but you can see that you get a map up here at the top, showing you the geography. So in this case, we're seeing a map of Buckeye. We have that same quick points of information up here at the top. So that hasn't changed at all. And then if we scroll down, we'll start to see all of those same sections that we're familiar with, along with the maps and the graphics. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that you can use this menu up here at the top if you wanted to switch to a different section. If you knew, for example, let's say we want families and living arrangements data, that's what we're worried about. We can click right on that and it'll bring it up. Right, and so we have the information here. And so it gives us a few different selected data points. If we wanted to find out more information, to see what else is there, for example, if we wanted to see what other information is available besides under 18 years of age, we can click on the link to the table here. So this information is coming from DPO5. And so if I click on that, it's going to take me straight to the full table. Now notice it's still for Buckeye. I haven't lost the geography. But now instead of just having those handful of data points that are included in the geo profile, you now have access to all of this different data found in this table. So that's another way that you can kind of get to certain tables that have information, that you're interested in.
Jessica, there is a question, or someone has their hand raised. Krista McGarvey.
Hi, Barbara. Yes, no, I don't have a question. I can't see the presentation. I don't know if anybody else is in the same boat as I am. Yesterday's presentation was fine, but today I can't see anything.
I can actually see the presentation.
Yeah.
I can
Krista,
see it as well.
You may have to sign out and sign back in.
Okay, I'll give that a shot. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry about that, Jessica.
No. I want to make sure everyone can see it. So, yeah, we'll have to hopefully get that figured out. But so then you have the table there. So you have all of the information there that you need. Again, it defaults back to the 2021 ACS one-year estimates because that data is available, but you can always obviously switch to something else if you wanted. So for our next example, we're going to take a look, instead of using the single search, we're going to look at the advanced search. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the advanced search, but it's basically a way of manually selecting the filters that you want, and then, adding them to your search and then working from there. So for this example, we're still going to look at the 2021 ACS data. We're going to be looking at income data for this. And we're going to look at it for all of the metro and micro statistical areas in Alabama. And so for this, I'll give you a little spoiler alert. We're going to look at, I call them the within other geographies. It's a button you may have seen at the top of the filter panels. Those are really handy. Let's go ahead and take a look, and then I can explain it while we're going through. So let's go ahead and do a clean search. And so we want to use the advanced search. We're going to click on that. And I'm going to go ahead and select the income topic. So we'll click on topics, and then we want income and poverty, and then income and earnings. And then I'm going to use this middle one, this income for households, families, and individuals. All right, and so we've added that. And so now let's do our geography. So initially starting out, it's, you go to geography, there's nothing terribly special about it. And so we're looking at metro and micro statistical areas. So it's, the label just says metro statistical area, but that's fine. That's what we want. And so when we click on that, if you've ever used this geography, the list is going to look familiar. It's just going to list out all of the different metro and micro areas across the country. So if you wanted to get just those that are in a certain state, for this example, that's what we're looking at, any that are in Arizona, you can click on this within other geographies button up here at the top. And so when you click on that, you can choose either state. For this instance, you can choose either state or combined statistical area. Now we're looking for Arizona, so I'm obviously going to click on state. And then once that comes up, we can specify the state that we're looking for. So on Arizona. And so when that comes up, the list is going to be tailored to showing you just those metro and micro areas that are either completely within Arizona or somehow touching it. Because metro and micro areas can cross boundaries, state boundaries, so they're not all exclusively located fully within the state. But you can see that list here, and we can go ahead and select all of them. All right, so I've added that. So we have all of these, one quick check mark, and we have all of these added to our search. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hit the search button. And so we get some tables back. All of these obviously are related to income in some way. I want to use this first table, S1901, income in the past 12 months. Let's go ahead and on that. All right, and so then we have, let me hide these. So then we have the data now for all of those metro micro areas found in Arizona. All right, so all of that. So it's just, these within other geographies are just additional ways to kind of grab a collection of geographies that are, tailored to a certain area, or, kind of narrowed down the list. They're very handy. One thing I do want to mention, though, is be cautious in using them, because you may use them and say, oh, I want ACS data, but the reality is that so far as it's been mapped so far, that it's only going to give you decennial data, and it may be old decennial data from 2010. So just be careful about that. Not all of them are, I guess you could say, fully mapped so far to all of the different possible surveys and geographies, or I guess I should say surveys that they're available for. So just kind of keep that in mind. This one obviously gave us ACS data, but I have seen some where it's only going to give you decennial data, even if technically ACS data is available for them. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you wanted to add additional filters to your search, you could do so. I closed these panels earlier, but we can open them back up. And so, if you wanted to add, something besides the metro and micro areas, you could do so just by using this, again, this panel over here on the left. I did kind of mention it a second ago. You can use these chevrons here to close these panels. And if you want to open them back up, you can just click on the buttons and it'll do so. So that's nice to make a little more room for the table. Sometimes, it's not enough room. Again, kind of what you saw before on the initial I should say on the all results page. You can change the number of tables that you're looking at. So right now we have 201 tables, and we only get 10 of them at a time. So if you wanted to change it and look at, say, 50 tables, you can do so. It doesn't look like anything happened. But when you go down the list now, you have a full line of all 50 tables, well, the first 50 tables of this result. So that's nice. That helps make it a little bit easier to find what you're looking for. And then if you wanted to, you can also keep in mind, just change the width of these columns if you wanted. If you wanted to fully see what the name of the filter is, you can do that, kind of move everything around. I tend to keep them a little more smushed, just so I have a little more room for the table itself. But again, you can always just close it up, and that gives you basically the full screen for the table. Let's move to our next example. And so for this one, we're going to kind of build on that advanced search usage. For this one, oops, shouldn't have been, there we go. So for this one, we're going to kind of actually use the single search bar initially, and then we're going to add in that advanced search. We're going to kind of put them together. We're going to be looking at housing tenure data. So we're going to be using two specific tables, B25014 and B25044. Both of those are detailed tables from the ACS. And we want to look at that data for a block group in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Let's go to the site. And let's do a clean search. All right, so one of the best ways that I have found to use the single search bar is if I know a table ID, or if I know a geography, or if I have something specifically in mind. Sometimes I'll go ahead and just use the single search bar so I can get right there. And so in this case, we know the tables that we want. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in there. So B25014 and we want B25044. So I've added both of those in there. And when I hit the search button, you're going to get both of those tables back. So that was super quick, just got straight to what I need. And now I can work from here. So let's take a look at the tables tab so we can get into the tables. Now, this is defaulting to the 2021 ACS one-year data. That's because we're looking at the US. We didn't select a geography yet, so we're still looking at the US. And we're looking for, in this example, block group data. And so block group data is only available using the ACS 5-year estimates. So I'm going to actually switch right now to the 2020 ACS 5-year estimates. And those are the most recent 5-year estimates we have available at the moment. All right, so I've switched that up. And so one of the things that comes up pretty often is that most people, if you ask them what a tract number is for a certain area, or what a block group number is for a certain area, nobody knows. I don't even, my own address, I have no idea what tract it's in. It's just not something that's common knowledge. And so you can use the maps and the site to help kind of sort that out. And so that's kind of what we're going to do here. So the block group that we need, the only thing I know is that it's in Sierra Vista. So to help kind of make life a little easier on myself, I'm going to go ahead and add Sierra Vista. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and add Sierra Vista to our search. All right, so I clicked on geography, and then it's a place. And then we just need Arizona. And obviously, Sierra Vista is going to be at the bottom of a very long list. So I'm going to click in the search bar here and just type in Sierra, and I get the results. So I'm going to check Sierra Vista City, Arizona. All right, and I'm going to hit this X so we can close it. So the reason that I did that is because I want to be able to go to the map and have Sierra Vista come up, just because it's easier to find that way. I think it'll make a little more sense once we get to the map. Now you can click on the Maps tab. I will mention to you, you probably see that we're hovering over New Mexico. There is a defect right now with the site that we're working to get fixed, where if you go from the tables to the maps, it doesn't zoom in where it should. So the workaround at this moment is to go back to the All tab. It's kept your geographies, nothing's been lost, but we go back to the All tab, and then we go to the maps. And then we get Sierra Vista. So that's been a lifesaver, especially if you're not familiar with the area. It's going to take you a really long time to try and figure out where it's at, in many cases. So we have Sierra Vista here. And make a little more room here. So I know perhaps the roadways that I need to, that are of interest, okay? And so that's what we're gonna end up using to find this. The tract and the block group that I need, I know that they are found in the area of Catalina Drive and East Mesquite Drive. Now, again, if you're not familiar with this area, it may take you a while trying to look around Sierra Vista to find these two little roadways, okay? And so one of the ways to help make this a little bit easier is, well, let me show you what you can do to make it a little easier. First, we know that we want to look at tracts and block groups. So we can add them to the map. We can add the boundaries for those to the map using the boundaries button. And so when we click on that, we want to check the box for census tract. So we can add the borders and the labels. And we also want to do census block group. And so you can see those are in the light pink, the tracts are in darker red. Now, what we can do now is kind of zoom in a little bit. And I happen to kind of have an idea of where this Catalina Drive and East Mesquite Drive is. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Now, let me see when the roadway is. Now, you can see roadway names come up, but they're really hard to see, at least for me. I can't see anything to begin with. I can't tell what that says. And so what I like to do is actually switch the base map. Right now we're on a basic, but if you switch it over to detailed, the text becomes like black now, so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. It's still kind of tiny, but I can definitely read it. So we're looking for this Catalina Drive and East Mesquite Drive. Okay, so let's kind of zoom in a little bit. Let me zoom out a little bit. Let's see. Let me see what I'm looking at. Okay, I'm in the wrong area. All right, so it's kind of more here in the center. All right, so let's do a little busier area. So now we can definitely see. All right, so we have here's East Mesquite Drive. And here is, looks like this is Catalina Drive. So we need this, basically this area right here. Okay, now we could kind of keep an eye on this and zoom in and out. I can see it's a 1 here. So it's a block group 1. Looks like it's census tract 1601. But sometimes it gets a little bit tricky to kind of feel confident that you're reading this correctly. Okay, I can tell you from experience. So one of the other things that you can do is use this identify button up here in the ribbon. And so when you click on that, if you were to click on the intersection of Catalina Drive and East Mesquite, it's going to give you the information about that particular spot. So we can confirm that it is block group 1 in census tract 16.01. So I did read it correctly, but again, I can tell you sometimes it's nice to be able to confirm with this identify button. We can also find out additional information. If you needed to find like the GeoID, you can click on this chevron here, and that'll give you the full GeoID. I know a lot of people are interested in that, so that's one way to find that out. All right, so we have this block group 1, census tract 1601, 16.01 in Cochise County. All right, so now that we know what we're looking for, what we need to add, we know the block group that we need, we can exit out of the identify tool. And now at this point, we can go back to the tables and go back to the filters, and we can go ahead and add that in. So I'm going to go ahead and click on geography, and then we're looking at a block group, and then we're looking at Arizona, Cochise County, and then we needed census tract 16.01. And so there's 3 different block groups, but we know we want block group 1. All right, so I've added that, and let's close it out. And so now we have that data there on the table. And so again, most people don't know when you're talking about tract numbers and block group numbers and block numbers, all of those things, most people aren't going to know what those are. So the map is really instrumental in being able to figure that out. And then you can use all of those buttons, the identify button, add the boundaries, all of those different functionalities that they're kind of newer. They're newer things that we've added to the mapping. All of those can really help make it easier to kind of figure that information out. And so then you can go ahead and add it to your table and get the data that you need for it. And while we're on here, I want to go ahead and show you just a couple other things. So if you wanted to, for example, I kind of max these out with this. Let me do this. Let's close this so we can kind of see the table. So probably many of you know, but I'll mention it. You can also change the width of the columns within the table itself. I don't really have too much of a problem with these, but I'll kind of spread it out a little bit more so it's a little easier to read. If you wanted to save the URL, you can just copy up here at the top, copy the URL, and that will, you can save it, make a bookmark of it, send it to somebody else, and when you copy that URL, that's going to have all that information that's included so far in the search and the results. And so when you send that to somebody else or you save it as a bookmark, you can come right back to it. One other thing I kind of wanted to mention with this that I found a little more helpful as well is it's not unusual for people to use the same geographies over and over and over again. And so if you have a list of geographies, even if it's not that many, but if you have a lot of different geographies, remember that you can add them to a search and just copy the URL from up at the top, and then you can reload that every time you needed to do a new search with that. So in this case, as an example, if I selected all of my geographies and before I did any search, before I hit the search button over in the corner, if you add all of those in, you can copy the URL and save your search that way. And then you can just open it, add different topics if you need to, add additional geographies, whatever it is that you need, you can go ahead and do that. But saving that search is a nice little head start that you'll have. And then if we wanted to, for example, print this table, we can use the print button here. Just keep in mind that printing is only going to include the first page of the data and then the notes. This table isn't so bad, so it's probably not going to be much of a problem. But keep in mind, I did cut it off a little bit. So you can always change the settings, make it a little bit smaller, kind of fit everything on there, or adjust the columns as you need to. But just keep in mind that you want to check and make sure that when you print the table that it's printing everything you expect it to. And you may have to make adjustments. That's all I wanted to show you with that example. Okay. Now, for our next one, we're still going to use that advanced search, but we're going to go back to trying another example with the within other geography selection. So for this one, we're going to look at health insurance data. We're going to be looking at table B27001, and we're going to look at all of the ZICTAs that are in Goodyear, Arizona. Go back to the site. All right, and so I'm going to use the advanced search. And the first thing that I'm going to do is go ahead, I'm going to do the geography first on this one. So we'll click on geography. And so we're looking at zip code tabulation areas or ZICTAs. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then we have, if you've used ZICTAs before, this is the list that you're most familiar with seeing. You have the list of states, and you can kind of drill down. We're going to use the within other geographies, though, for this. So we're looking at ZICTAs in Arizona. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Arizona for this. And then you have the list of all of the ZICTAs in Arizona. This is the point where I'm going to go ahead and click on within other geographies. And so we have the option to look at them by county or by place. Now, I wanted to look at them for Goodyear, so I'm going to go ahead and click on place. And so then what we have now is the list of all of the cities, towns, villages, CDPs, all of that stuff. We want Goodyear, so I'm going to go into the search and type that in there. right? And so we want Goodyear City. And so then what we have now is a list that's filtered down to include just those ZICTAs that are either fully within Goodyear or some part of them touches Goodyear. So it's not a massive list, but it didn't require you to know any of these ZICTAs ahead of time. So that's my favorite part of it. I don't have to do any research ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this all 5-digit ZICTAs within Goodyear. And then we're looking at health insurance data. So I'm going to click on topics and then health, and then check the box for health insurance. Now I specifically want to look at the detailed tables. We want that B27001 table. But I also kind of want to see what else is there. And I don't just want that table in general. So I'm going to go ahead and look at surveys, American Community Survey, 5-year estimates. That's the only one available because, again, we're looking at ZICTAs, and ZICTAs are only available with 5-year. And then we have some tables to choose from. I want the detailed ones. All right, so then let's go ahead and hit search. And so we get a nice little list of tables back. We actually have 43 of them. They all tell different information, so I definitely want to check out these other tables eventually, but for this example, we're just going to take a look at B27001. Let's make a little room here. So we can see that again, using the most recent 5-year data that's available. So we're using the 2020 ACS 5-year estimates. And we have data now for all of those ZICTAs that are either fully or partially within Goodyear. Now, let's say that I want to make a map. I'm particularly interested in males who are 26 to 34 years of age that actually have health insurance coverage. And so this is the estimate that I want to go ahead and map out. Now, I should be able to click on maps and have it go where it should. But again, that defect is coming into play. So it doesn't want to go where it's supposed to. We are over Arizona, but it's not really where we want it to be. So I'm going to find where we need to be, and I'm going to zoom in. I see that there's a ZICTA down here, but I'm going to focus on this cluster of them right here. So we have the ZICTAs here. We have the data for it. Now, the map is going to default to showing you the first estimate of table B27001, which happens to be the estimate, the total number. Okay, so we don't really quite want that. We wanted to focus on those males 26 to 34 that have health insurance. And so the way that you can change the map in that aspect is to click on the variables button here. And you can see it's showing total estimate, but there's a chevron here. And so then you get a list of all of the different lines of table B27001. That's a long list. There's a lot to look through. And so you can search to narrow it down a little bit. So I'm going to do 26 to 34 to help narrow it down at least to those age groups. And we're looking at males, and we want 26 to 34 with health insurance. So I want that one. And we can click out to close that little box that was there. And so now we can see that the map is updated. So now we have that variable showing in the map that we wanted. And so now we can do with the map what we needed, you know, get the information printed off, however we wanted to do it. I want to show you some other stuff with the mapping. Let's say that you want to select some surrounding ZICTAs in this case. If you have individual geographies that you want to select, the easiest way to do so is just to click on the geography and hit the select button. And you can see it's added. Now, if you have more geographies, more than one, it may be a little tenuous to sit there and select each of those individually. And so the way around that is to click on the select button. And you get this kind of change up here at the top in this panel here, so you can kind of tell that you're in the select tool. And so when you go to the map, you have this plus sign that comes up, and so all you have to do is just click on one of the geographies that you want and drag the mouse around to select the geographies that you want to add to your search or add to this map in this case. Now just be careful, because any geography that touches this rectangle is going to be selected. All right, and then once you've got everything where you need it to be, you just release the click, and those are going to be selected as well. Whoops, let me not do that. So I messed up. I should have gone ahead and exited out of the select tool before I tried to move the map. All right, and so you can see all of these were selected. Now, if you made a mistake, in this case I did, you can just click on it and just deselect it, and then it's gone. So you can fix up the mess ups, but you know, just kind of keep that in mind. Up here at the top, if you wanted to change the year that you're looking at, you can do so using this button, this year button here. Right now we're looking at 2020. I'm fine with looking at 2020, but if I wanted to look at older years of data, I could do so. We have the base map button. We kind of went over that earlier. If you wanted to change it from the basic map to the detailed one where it has the roadways. There's also the none. That's a purely blank white map. It has no roadways, no bodies of water, no anything on it other than the geographies you've selected, highlighted. That's it. So I'm going to leave it on the basic right now. I don't really need to change it. We have the colors button here if you wanted to change the color scheme. We have the classes button. So you can break the classes down in different ways. You can change the number of classes, but you can also manually make your own breaks. So that's something newer that's been added, the manual breaks that you can do yourself. We have the notes button over here. And that's just going to give you notes related to the map, related to the data. You have all kinds of information here about the ACS, some map notes down here at the bottom. And then you have the table button. So right now, this is giving you a quick, I guess you can call it a snapshot of what we're looking at the moment. So you can see the data for each of those dictas that we've selected. But we're looking at the males 26 to 34 that have health insurance. You can see the estimated number there. But if you wanted to go back to the full table, you could click on the Tables tab, or you could click on this View Full Table button. All right, and so we're back where we started. We're back to the full table. While we're here, I wanted to show you how to download and export tables. We have 3 buttons here, right? So we have Excel, CSV, and Zip. So Excel and CSV are both going to export the table, albeit in slightly different ways. So if you export using the Excel button, if it's going to work, oh, it's opening another window. What you're going to get is this nice presentation-friendly table, right? Basically, it looks like what you see on the screen. It's not quite as fancy, but it's definitely readable, presentation friendly. Let me minimize that. The CSV is also going to export it, but it's going to look a little bit different, not quite as fancy even as that Excel version. You know, it's still nice to have the labels the way that they are, but the data is formatted. Not quite as much formatting applied to the table itself, okay, but it's still the exported version. And what kind of seems to be throwing people is when they want to download the table. It seems like some people are going to the CSV button, and I can understand why. Trust me, I understand why. But if you're downloading, you actually want to use this Zip button. And so, you know, you select the years that you want, go ahead and hit Download CSV. And you can monitor the download over here in the corner. All right, and so I'm going to go ahead and open up the zip file. I'll go over here too. And so you get the same 3 files. Just keep in mind that I don't know how many people really have paid much attention to what they're named, but we did recently change the names of these. So you have the column metadata, you have the data, and the table notes now. So the naming convention is slightly different than what it used to be. We still want the data. I think before it was data with overlays, I think was the name. And so this is the download. But what everybody loves about the download is that you get that GeoID column. So just, again, we've been running into instances where people have been using the CSV button and they're upset that they're not getting that GeoID mixed in. And that's the reason why. You have to use that zip button in order to download, in order to get the GeoID. I'll close all that out later. Okay. All right, so let's go to our last example. All right, so far we've been focusing, pretty much all on demographic data. So I wanted to include some information about the economic data. And this, I actually wanted to show you the mapping of kind of what that looks like. It's a little bit different when you're looking at economic data in the map versus looking at demographic data. So for this example, we're going to be looking at economic data for a zip code, and then we're going to also look at it for all counties in Arizona. Let's do a clean search. And so we're going to use the advanced search for this. Now, the NAICS code that I want to use for this is the information one. So I'm going to click on codes and then industry codes NAICS. And then we have the list of different NAICS. I want 51 information. And for now, I'm just going to go ahead and select this 51 information one, the highest, I guess you could say the highest level NAICS we have. Right, and so for this example, the geography that I want to look at is going to be a 5-digit zip code. So just remember, economic area uses zip codes, not ZICDAs. So 5-digit zip code. And it's a huge list because it's going to bring up every zip code in the US, not filtered out by state. I'm going to give it a few moments. There we go. All right, so I'm obviously not going to scroll down this list, so I'm definitely going to use the search button here, or the search bar. We're looking for a zip code in Prescott, Arizona. So we can either put in Prescott and have the list come up. It's going to bring up Prescotts from other parts of the country, but you could put it in, or you can just put the zip code in and get that. All right, so we want 86301. So I found that, I've checked the box, added it to the search. And so let's go ahead and take a look at what comes back. All right, so we get county business patterns data. Let's use the 2020 table, CB 2000 CBP. And so I wanted to show you this. There's a general rule that with the economic data, especially, that when you're looking at NAICS codes, the more detailed you get, whether it's with the NAICS code or with the geography, the less likely you are to find data. Okay, and so for this example so far, what we used a fairly detailed geography. We used a zip code, but we kept it at a very high level NAICS. And so you can see it kind of pays off because we have more data available than we may otherwise have with other combinations. So we can see we have the number, all establishments data, but then we also have it broken down by the number of employees. So that's kind of a nice breakdown. And I wanted to kind of compare this with if you were to try and use the same geography but have a more detailed NAICS code. Okay, so again, for this one we use 51, and you can see the amount of data that we got back. Now if I get rid of 51 and let's go to codes again, do industry codes. Still want to do information, but I'm going to dig down a little bit deeper, drill into it. Let's do 511 and then 5111, and we're using a 4-digit NAICS for this. So not terribly deep, but it's much deeper than that 2-digit. And so you can see now that that cost us some data. We still have information on the total number of establishments, but we lost that breakdown that we had when we were using the higher level NAICS. So just kind of keep that in mind. It is a balancing act. But in general, if you're using a smaller geography, you're going to want to use a larger or higher level NAICS code. But if you are using a larger geography, that's when you can really start to dig down. And so let's go ahead and do an example of that. So let's do a clean search for this. We'll go to the advanced search. So I'm going to do a much more detailed NAICS code for this. So click on codes, industry codes. I'm still going to use information, but I'm going to drill down now. So we're going to do 511, publishing industries. Let's do 5111, newspaper, periodical, book, and directory publishers. And let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and use this one. All right, so 5111, newspaper, periodical, book, and directory publishers. Now, instead of using a zip code, though, this time I'm going to use a different geography. So we're going to look at all of the counties that are in Arizona. So I'm going to click on geography and then county. Then we went Arizona, and then we went all counties within Arizona. All right, so let's go ahead and hit search. All right, and so we get a list of tables back. I'm gonna do, I think I messed something up. Let me see. Let's see if I get it. Okay, it's farther down the list. So I want this CB 2000 CBP. So again, we're using county business patterns data, same table. Okay. And so you can see that we have data for quite a few counties, but definitely not all of the counties. And so even when you're using larger geographies, like at the county level, it still kind of holds true that if you use a detailed NAICS, you're still not going to have quite as much data. Just again, kind of keep that in mind. I think that's a really important thing. Sometimes, you know, it becomes a question of why can't I get this? And it's just because sometimes that combination isn't going to work. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, with this table or any of the economic tables, many of them you have the option of filtering it down more. This table isn't too terrible, but some of these tables get really big. And so if you click on the filter button here, you can filter by the different columns of this. So for example, if I wanted to look at, let's do number of establishments. All right, and so we can change the way that we want to look at it. So for this one, I'm going to do, let's do less than, and we'll say 25. All right, and so I don't know if you caught it or not, but the table actually adjusted. Let me hit the filter button again to close that. And so now you can see that we have just the lines of data that the number of establishments is less than 25. And so it narrowed the table down a little bit. If we wanted to get a little more, we could change the number, say from 25 to, you know, maybe let's do less than 10. And that narrowed the table down even more. So you can kind of filter out certain things if you're not interested in that, or if you're, you know, whatever you want to do, you can kind of filter the tables, economic tables that way. The other thing I wanted to show you with this is that you have access to the FTP site. If you click on the More Data button, you can go to the FTP. And so there you can have access to the larger files for download. Let's go back to the site. Now I wanted to kind of show you the mapping with this too. So let's go to the Maps tab. All right, and so we have the data for all of the counties in Arizona. So at the outset, it doesn't look terribly different from what we've seen with the demographic data. Where things get a little bit different, though, is when you click on the variables button. Now, right now, we're looking at number of employees. So when you click on the variables button, you have a lot more options available than we did with those ACS tables. Now, another thing to keep in mind if you're mapping with any of the economic data is that even though we selected our NAICS of 5111, and that was what was showing in the table, all of that was what we wanted. just keep in mind that it's actually defaulted back to the total for all sectors. So it's gone back to 0, 0. And so what we'll have to do is actually change it back to 5, 1, 1, 1. And then here it is. All right, and so now the data is going to match what we see on the table. Just keep that in mind. Doesn't matter what NAICS you selected, it's going to always go back to that 0, 0. Now, there's other things you could change on this if you wanted to, instead of, say, look at all establishments. Maybe you want to look at, you know, certain types. I don't know, nonprofits. It's not a good one, I guess. But you can kind of switch it around to see what's available. You can also change the variable that you're looking at. Right now, we're looking at a number of employees. I can switch it to something else. If I want to look at number of establishments, I can do so. And once you have it where you want, you can just click out, and that'll close that panel. And most of the other buttons, they function the same way. That's the big difference. Is this variables button. It's very different for the economic data. All right, so let's go back. All right, and so before we wrap up, I just wanted to quickly go over our resources page. We have a lot of information to be found on the resources page. We have walkthrough documentation, video tutorials. We have latest releases or upcoming releases that are going to be released to Data.Census.Gov, the API, and MDAT. We have, again, the guidance for data users on all the different topics. Video tutorials, webinars, frequently asked questions, all of that is really good stuff. And then we also have our email updates if you're interested in getting those. So we have the link there for that. And there is our resources page URL. And if you do have questions, comments, suggestions, you can always email us at census.data@census.gov. And I finished by the hair of my teeth. I guess, do we have any questions? Any questions that came in?
Does anyone have any questions for Jessica on the Data.Census.Gov? I know it's quite a bit of information.
Yeah, I don't have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, Alan. I don't
no
have a
problem.
question, but this is all fantastic, and I could see myself just going and spending lots of quality time on this website. So thanks for showing all the ins and outs.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of information. I believe, and Barb can correct me if I'm wrong, I think you all get the deck afterwards, so you all can always walk through and, you know, on your own speed, take a look at what we have.
And we did have. Go ahead, Barbara.
I was just going to say, Jessica, does your slide deck have the slides to show the different steps too?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
all of that's outlined. Yeah.
Would you please make sure you send that to Alan?
Yes, of course. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, and yeah, I will have you know, when I get that, we will be posting it on the Arizona State Data Center web page, which is through the Arizona Commerce Authority's website. So